Where are you going?
At Cascade.
I can tell you where 200 head are this morning. In his county.
We don't have that here though.
Ooh, hot off
Hot off the press.
Signature page on the very back.
Okay. So, and then we need to take these down to Doug then?
Yep.
And I'll send them to Erin, get her signature, and have her keep one, and we'll keep one. And I'll
If
get copies.
before you send it, or bring me a copy so I can have
Okay.
a working copy of the copies.
Thank you both for the work on that.
It was my first one doing it, and we had, I think at one point jokingly said, let's get it done before Christmas, and then lo
Sure
and behold, we did.
Dun, dun, dun. Can we get a copy too?
Yes.
All right.
Get a copy around. All right. Those are old drafts, we better not get those confused. The other issue was the DLL audit issue. I know next to nothing about it, but I guess the question is, are they saying we owe a fee plus a late fee at this point?
They are saying that, and the county has asked them for documentation. They have the authority to bill us, and we've received nothing, no communication since then.
Is that, and we've asked them specifically for the fee and the late fee, or just the late fee authority?
There isn't a fee,
Okay,
so it's just the late fee.
okay.
Yep.
And then you said you talked to Harold like in the spring?
When he was here for that budget training, he was gonna go talk to DOA, Department of Administration, after that, about this issue, because we are not the only county that's having this issue. I don't know whatever came of that, but I did talk to Bob Denny, who does our audit. He's the owner of Denny and Downing Associates. And we paid him and his staff to do this for us. He said he put in far more hours than we paid. He made multiple attempts to get it done, communication back and forth. It was not constructive. And consequently, what happened is they had columns of numbers that had to be added up, but instead of writing 100, they wanted ONEHUND.
Oh, okay.
And so the ability to find errors, to add columns, it just wasn't there. And that was the big problem with this whole thing.
Okay. Let me then talk to Harold. I'm supposed to talk to him this week anyway, so I'll talk to Harold and find out if they don't pay anything right now, but I'll get you an answer before the end of the year, so we can at least, the end of when we close out the year, we'll know we're either planning on paying them something or planning on disputing it, and I'll get that to you.
Perfect.
It's been an area that I kind of like, I don't even know what that is, so I'll leave it alone and move on to other things, and so I'll get you an answer on that. Did with the salary change that was done last month, did you guys do a resolution? The changes from the 32 hours, was it 30 or 32 hours?
We didn't change the resolution. We can do that with the New Year's resolutions, put it all as one step,
The
and
salary
also setting
itself won't change,
compensable.
but sorry?
We should also put in the compensable in a resolution as well.
Well, and what I'm referring to there is the commissioner's hours at 32, and the compensable, we're referring to the health insurance, correct? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, what did you decide that your hours would change effective December 1 or January 1? I thought it was December 1 for January 1 health insurance, is that accurate?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. education that there needs to be a salary resolution, and I thought, well, I don't know that there is one, so.
Yeah, I don't think we set a date actually on the resolution, or the vote on that. Something we'll have to look
Okay,
at.
I thought you did,
Maybe we did.
in order to fit the January health insurance, where if it's effective January 1, then they look at the hours in December, but just checking that.
Mhm.
That's the only issue I have until I think we're ready for Mr. Wright, so.
Can I ask about the jail diversion grant? We have Mike Stevenson here too, who had questions on that. We had a meeting 2 months ago, and Nicole needed, some information. You were gonna talk to Julie, was her name, I think, and then get together with Nicole. I haven't heard anything from anybody.
I haven't done very much since then, actually. I did talk to the lady, her name's Katie Lovewood.
Katie.
Talked to her in Helena. She explained that basically what she did was an analysis of needs, and the one that they did was actually for Helena. Analysis of needs within the community and how it interacts with law enforcement and other things. She finalized the report, or she was doing a report, it was done, but hadn't been like finally approved and published. So one of the things I was waiting on is she was gonna say, when this report's published, I'll send you a copy so you understand kind of the scope of what I did. And I don't think that's been done yet. Met with Mike, probably Thursday or Friday, gave him the phone number for this lady, and then that's about as far as we've gotten. So, I think the next thing to do would be to first, I think Mike, to encourage Mike to make contact with her. And then I think the second thing is I'd like to get a report. So I understand the scope of what she did for that community to do kind of the same, answer the same questions we had. And then I understand that there's another entity that can kind of do the same type of analysis, so we may want to use them rather than her. And then from there, we're probably back to, we need to get everybody together and kind of define the problem. And so I haven't made much progress since then, so I apologize for that. That's where we are right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will tell you, since then, at the time of our meeting, we were in the midst of, we had either had or we were beginning to deal more with a couple of different people that had some mental health issues that our first interaction with them was through law enforcement context. And so since that time, we've gone through a lot of hoops and movements and dealing with people that were in a law enforcement held situation, mental health needs, and we sent them for treatment, analysis, all this stuff. So in that process, I think it just reemphasized to me the fact that we understand that we need more capabilities in Townsend. Secondly, the capabilities in Helena were, they worked for what we needed, but they weren't, I guess, they're not flush with extra capacity. They're dealing with probably more than they can handle in the Helena community, even though there are at least 2 different facilities there that are able to handle community health, mental health issues, emergency mental health issues. So it kind of reemphasized to me that if there's anything we can do to get a Townsend solution or get some more tools in Townsend, we need to do it. Because there's a lot of times when Helena is really tapped out. So then our option is we can send someone to Warm Springs, even if it's for an overnight hold. Well, a lot of times that's not the best place for them. Transport can be hard on them, especially if they're in poor health. And then many times Warm Springs is at capacity. So the way this works is it doesn't matter if Warm Springs is at capacity or over capacity. If a judge signs an order saying you have to take them no matter what, they have to take them no matter what. And so there's different levels of at capacity, over capacity, really over capacity. No, we really mean an emergency over capacity at Warm Springs. And it's really unfortunate for them because there are a lot of times when they are forced to take people and they simply are more overwhelmed than even the professional judgment of what overwhelmed is. So, to the extent we can avoid having people go to Warm Springs for one overnight or a day or two in an emergency situation, we should do that because They're never really at a point where they're caught up and have extra ability to take care of people. They're pretty well, usually at the margins of keeping up, at least in the 2 or 3 different times I've had to deal with them this year.
Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add or question or
Just
whatever?
want to really thank Corey for giving me the phone number of the gal there, and I have talked to her, planning on meeting with her next week. And as I shared with you, she's looking at more of kind of doing a mining survey of the data that's available versus a more scientific look at the county. So it's a two-edged sword, you know. There is some good you can get out of that, just like the Broadwater Healthcare Center. You know, it's probably 40% reliable. Well, that's better than by guess and by gosh. But I would rather see us have something that would be like an 80–90% reliability for really knowing what's going on in the county. And I think, yeah, there's multiple number of issues here, and I think we're gonna see more and more of that. Corey's gonna be faced with more of these complicated cases, and we would love to get some resources to be able to help that. I think probably what I'm seeing right now, and it's not anything statistical that I can tell you, but I think our problems with our jail and our court and mental health are probably one of our #1 issues. And it would be high on my assessment list for the local LAC in looking at issues for mental health here. Probably something we could even do something about.
Brenda, did you like to add anything to that?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay. How would you like to do the status hearing, Mr. Wright?
However you think.
Like, Denise here, and Sadie Bush is here, she's his attorney, from Defender's Office in criminal context. And I guess I'll let her tell first her status here. You wanna go ahead with?
Sure. Yeah, I am representing Mr. Wright in his criminal matters. I've talked with him, and he understands that I am not representing him as to this particular thing that we're dealing with today, which is the banning order, keeping him from the county buildings. That being said, as I'm sure everyone is aware, he has pending criminal charges, and I have advised him not to delve into any of the issues relating to those. I don't want him to be put in a situation where he could be made to say something that could be incriminating toward his criminal charges, which he is still innocent of at this point. So I just want to try to keep the focus as narrow as possible just to that particular order, and I will let him speak to that.
Yes, Corey, appreciate you being here. And all else, all 3 of you commissioners. Now, with that said, my main objective is what I stated Monday or a week ago, I think, or thereabouts, to you present me with a original, not copy, the original document of the banning order. Put it in my little hot hand so I can have somebody else read it. I can't read it, but at least I can feel it. Now, with that said, do you have it?
I do not. Corey, do you have it?
I received the original, and I guess, I don't know if we want to just do back and forth, or how we want to do
That's
this.
fine.
but I received the original letter. I gave the original letter to Alan Wright, who, I said, your dad's asking for this is the original letter, can you give this to your dad? I kept a copy of it, but the original, the only one, that, as far as I know, in existence on this earth, I gave to Alan Wright, who I understood gave it to his dad, so that's what I can tell you.
And I consider that as original copy. I want to see the original as it was printed and was held by you two commissioners. Mr. Slifka didn't sign it, didn't authorize it. I want to see that because that's the beginning of it all. Now, I have Mr. Corey's original copy. That's not what I asked for. Now, my evaluation evaluation of it through a little bit of help, is that the first original one that came here, so-called the original, was done through the systems. There wasn't something that was handed from here to there. Now, where is the original? Because one of you two should have it, because y'all signed it,
I don't have it.
okay? Do you have it?
I defer to what the county attorney said.
No, I asked you, do you have it?
I defer to what the county attorney
I
said.
asked you to have it, do you have it? I want to get an answer. Corey, can I get an answer?
So let's go ahead and set the stage here a little bit. The original, I don't know why you're saying original versus original copy, I'm not sure what that means. The only original document I'm aware of, I got directly from Commissioner Overt. I asked her for it because you had asked me for it. I gave that original document, and not a substitute, not a copy, not a whatever, facsimile, to Helen Wright. So if there is some other document out there, then apparently none of us have it. Secondly, it doesn't matter.
Well, it does to me.
Well, I know, maybe to your theory it doesn't matter. Commissioners, I'll advise you, it doesn't matter. The document, and if you look at the rules of evidence and you look at documents that in terms of purporting what they say, or they say, whether they say what they're purporting to say, the original copy or whatever word you want to use for that document, in terms of its notice to Mr. Wright, its notice to the county, to the employees, to whomever, it's the same as if I did a photocopy. If you can read the language, if you can see the signatures, you can see the letterhead, then that's sufficient. Now, if there's a reason why the original actual piece of paper needs to be found, to the best of my knowledge, that original piece of paper was found, was delivered personally, or through a messenger to Mr. Wright, and that's the story. But secondly, we're getting off track. I guess I want to lay a little bit of context for the commissioners. At this point, this order that's being called the banning order is not actually a banning order, it's a restricted access is what it is. Not entirely, Mr. Wright's not entirely banned from the courthouse, he's restricted in how he can access the courthouse, meetings, other facilities, and there's a way for him to do that. That order is, a year old, a little over a year old. It was done before I was county attorney. And that's why I asked, I said, at this point, if we don't do a status update, we're basically having a permanent ban. And I don't know that a permanent ban is something that would be legally supportable for a variety of reasons. It's in courts, it's hard to get a permanent injunction on anything. When you say, this person may never ever go to, this location, or may never talk to this person, something like that that's an injunction. Permanent injunctions in the legal world happen only after they've had a full adjudication on the merits of whatever that dispute is that gave rise to the injunction. We've never had a full adjudication on the merits of whatever the dispute is between Mr. Wright and whomever within the county. So that's why I said, we need to have a status update. We can't have a permanent injunction that's never re-examined. So the purpose of this meeting, in my mind, is to, number one, to first bring up the issue, let Mr. Wright have an opportunity to be heard. If the county commissioners are saying, we think this is something we likely need to continue in place, then we need to probably set a hearing where we have a full due process where we can have witnesses come in, and we can have, whether from the side saying let it be banned, continue to be banned, or the witnesses from Mr. Wright saying why you shouldn't, and actually run through a kind of a quasi-judicial process where you're, as commissioners, are the fact finders. Keep in mind that any decision that the commissioners make on this issue is appealable to the district court, okay? And so to make that decision, if the decision is we're gonna ban Mr. Wright for whatever period of time, another year or whatever, let's go ahead and do the process correctly. But at this point, we have not had an opportunity to even have this conversation with myself, all of you, and Mr. Wright here. So that's my initial purpose, was not that we have a full-blown knockdown, drag-out fight hearing today, but that we simply come back and say, are you interested in dissolving it or continuing it? And if you say, let's continue it, let's go ahead and set a time when everybody can have kind of a more specific laid out agenda of what evidence you want to hear, what evidence Mr. Wright may want you to hear, and I can even give you a little kind of due process procedural thing for you to look at. I'm in a weird position because I'm both your attorney as well as your advisor, so in other words, if I'm the one coming in saying, you need to keep Mr. Wright out of the courthouse as kind of more of a prosecutorial tone, I also need to be your advisor to say, you need to do this and this and this in the interest of fairness. So my intention is not to come in as a prosecutor saying, you have to keep Mr. Wright out. My goal is to bring you the best information you can so that you can make a decision uninfluenced by just the fact that I'm the county attorney. But those are the two things I wanted to tell you is, first of all, that a decision, if you make this decision that you want to proceed, let's do an actual hearing of some kind with more due process. I don't think a permanent banning order or restriction order is appropriate without doing that full examination, because permanent injunctions are, in the world of courts, a difficult thing to achieve. And third, anything that you decide on can be appealed by a party with standing to the district court. Certainly Mr. Wright would have standing to appeal it if you say continue the banning order. Let's say you say we're going to get rid of the banning order. There may be county employees would have standing to appeal that, where they would say, I'm the one that gets harassed. Every Monday morning he comes in on the first face he sees and I get harassed, or something like that. Then they may be able to have standing to go challenge that in district court. Obviously, they may or may not have standing. And then the final thing I would say is, I just wanted to apprise you before, and I think after I say this, we gotta let Mr. Wright talk, because I'm sure he'll want to talk. I just want to advise you of where the current status of Mr. Wright's criminal case is. We don't want to talk and we're not going to adjudicate his criminal case today, but obviously this affects his contact with folks within the county, because the charges are threats and other improper influence in official and political matters and tampering with public records. So one of the conditions of his case is that he's not to talk to witnesses or victims in the case. Now, within the context of his attorney and preparing for his criminal case, yes, they absolutely will and the witnesses and victims are required to do an interview and allow the defendant and his attorney to gather information for his defense. But outside the context of that, he's not to have contact and outside of the court case, contact with the victims and the witnesses. That's why it's always best for him to do that through his attorney. So what the court has said is, number one, you need to go through your attorney for these contacts. I've specifically asked the court to order that he doesn't have contact with my office without going through his attorney. It's a little complicated right now because the status of his attorney is not as fully, empowered, I guess, as criminal defense attorneys ordinarily would be, but that's not our concern, that's their concern with the judge. So the victims, though, are Laura Obert, Doug Ellis, Carla Bossi, Elaine Gravely, and Judge Jeffrey Sherlock. Okay, so those victims, he shouldn't be harassing them under any conditions or circumstances, or he's violating the district court's order in the criminal case. Then the witnesses, there's many witnesses. Flips of these. I don't even have my full witness list. It's all been given to Mr. Wright. But okay, so Ann Dormandy, who's a investigation agent. I'll just go the ones that we know are here. Carla Bossi, Laura Obert, Elaine Gravely, Franklin Slifka, Doug Ellis, Donald Betts, Brooke Dolan, Scott Dunning, Brenda Ludwig, Virginia Knurr, Nyla Tyrell, Jeffrey Sherlock. So again, this is not saying he can never talk to witnesses or victims, because he has to be able to prepare his defense. But he's supposed to do that through his attorney in a way where he's not harassing them. So with that in mind, the question is, is a county policy restricting his access still a good idea? And then secondly, should the scope remain the same or should it change? And I'll just leave that and then see if Mr. Wright or Ms. Bush wants to offer anything. And Alan had his hand up at one point, sorry, we didn't recognize you, but,
I'll come back to that.
okay. So that's where I am, Madam Chairman, at this point.
Thank you.
My first question is to Corey. Corey, seeing that Elaine and Laura are against me, and I've taken them to the highest court in the land, how are we addressing each other now civilly and professionally? Can you answer that?
Well, you mean in terms of they're listed as victims, is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, and Franklin's listed as a witness too, so, you know, potentially all three of them are are in a difficult spot to make a decision where they're doing it unbiased. He hasn't taken you to the highest court in the land, and we have a dispute over how the court system works, but this is, don't worry about that. That's a good point. I think that would be an argument you might want to develop a little farther in terms of if they need to delegate decision-making on this to somebody else. They could always appoint an arbitrator or somebody, you know, that's qualified to make a decision. But that's at least an argument that you could make.
Is it an argument or is it a fact?
Because you're dealing with a subjective issue of, can they hear this matter fairly even though they're involved? I think it would not be a fact. It's a subjective issue as far as their ability to make a well-reasoned, impartial decision. So it's an argument, I would say.
It's impossible. Impossible.
Well, and Ms. Bush is nodding. I mean, I think there's some, and I'm not asking to drag you in, I'm sorry.
No.
I think there's an argument to be made there, John.
I'm kind of in a difficult position because I can't get too involved in this particular thing. But I would agree with what the county attorney said about perhaps the more appropriate place to address this issue would be to set it for a hearing with some people who are maybe not as involved with the criminal case and have it adjudicated that way. Would that be something?
Well, how would they be selected? Would it be all by them or do?
Well, and that would be something that you
Is
could.
it like this year or is it outright?
Well, that's something that we probably not even addressed today, but
Get
to be
working
looked
on
into,
it.
yeah.
Okay, I have one thing to say more than anything. And I feel that I've been raked over the coals with this banning order. And I'd like to see it dismissed right now. And I'd like to have a unanimous call by each one of you commissioners and our sheriff and our county attorney. And you'll have my 2 cents worth. Can I have a call?
Go first, John, with your 2 cents.
I demand it to be removed because it's not even a legitimate law, period. It's not recognizable by either constitutional law or state statutory law. I think it's a democratized, partially, but mostly British law, which was being used every day in the courtroom, which caused me more disturbing things than anything I've ever heard. I am a Lyman.
You're what?
A Lyman. My grandparents goes all the way back to King Arthur on the English line. Okay? I know the full text of British parliamentary law, which we as Americans suffered severely. The Revolution, the British law was parliamentary. The War of 1812, parliamentary. And they killed and maimed millions of us. And it was introduced by you 2 commissioners and enforced down our throats, and it caused me a constant repulsing and going against it. And you all know that. and then it spread over to the other agencies, partially. Now, that's a fact. My demand is, my 2 cents worth, is to ban it and get rid of it, and let's get our house in order.
Thank you. Cory, do you have anything?
Well, I guess the question, as I understand, well, as we've seen the current policy lately, Mr. Wright, like for example, last week, Mr. Wright needed to come into the court to get some records. So he got hold of Valerie Hornsfeld, and she escorted him in, or allowed him in somehow. He was in for, a good half a day. In fact, I went by the office and he was there, and I waved at him. I didn't go in and talk to him because he was there. But, so I think in the interim, until you decide what to do, or if you want to set a date, so long as we can, accommodate his needs to come in and do business with the way it is now, which is someone needs to escort him in, he calls in advance, or if a friend of his wants to come in and get something on his behalf, I think that's probably still workable. I think the greater concern for Mr. Wright is just making sure that from the criminal case point of view, he doesn't do something that would be considered a violation of a harassment related to victims or witnesses. I would say if you're interested in keeping this thing going, we do need to set a date and give everybody the opportunity to kind of do their homework on this. And I don't know, I mean, if there's a question, or if there's a concern about your fairness, or if it may just make it easier in terms of handing that off to somebody else where they don't have a connection there, certainly in terms of if that's challenged to a court, that gives you the ability to demonstrate your fairness. It may make sense to ask someone to hear the matter on your behalf. And then you're into the whole complicated thing of how you pick somebody, and if it's one person, if it's 3 people, that kind of thing. But there's ways to do that. I've seen that done before. That would be those are my 2 cents. I don't think you've imposed English parliamentary law an impression on anybody, so I don't agree with that part of what he said.
I personally, on behalf of all the county employees that have been so affected, would like to see it remain. Laura?
I'm not gonna make any kind of a motion to lift it at this time. Is there a way that we could wait until after the other trial is over, so that any impartiality is moot at that point? And then my second question is what would be the cost for a third party to hear this? Is this something that we would split the cost with Mr. Wright? County pays half, he pays half? Or is this something where people actually step in and volunteer?
But I think if you could get somebody to volunteer, that would be the best situation. I don't see this as a terribly expensive deal. I don't know that you'd have to have a court reporter. You'd certainly want to record it, I think, but I don't think there'd be a lot of expense. I actually don't have his trial date listed on my schedule. So I don't know that we've set a trial date.
I think the omnibus is the 20th or 29th of January.
Yeah, 29. So we haven't set a trial date. The trial is going to be a while. I mean, I'd be surprised if it's by the end of the summer, truthfully. So I would not recommend waiting that long.
John?
I would like to hear our sheriff's comment on the recommendation to remove this banning order, seeing that in all this time, not one little pinky's ever touched anybody. Just words, and respond to words that came to me through actions. And when somebody quotes parliamentary law, it does. I'd like to hear our sheriff respond what she feels.
Brenda?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I've never had anybody file a complaint with my office since I've been sheriff, as far as him making a physical threat towards him. The only one I had was Scott, which he adamantly did not want to follow through with. I'll be the first one to say, John, at times you can be a pain in the rear.
I'll agree.
But when I tell John, it's, done and over with, John respectfully listens to that. My office cannot escort John around the courthouse, you know, and John has called me several times because he can't get somebody over here to call him back, you know, over here. And I've spoke to other elected officials and they're like, well, we don't wanna call him back. And that's not fair on him either. You know, so I see where he's coming from and I'm wanting it lifted. You know, so you gotta take that into consideration on keeping it in place. Either they're gonna call him back and say, hey, I can't do it today, you know, maybe tomorrow, or it's gotta be lifted, one or the other. You know, it's been going on for a year and he has been abiding by it. So, something's gotta be done.
Thank you.
And just like the other day, he was very respectful in here.
Franklin, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, I kind of relate what the sheriff said. I've never had a problem with John, and I think the same thing. If I said, John, that's enough now, he's been okay with me. As far as the access and everything here, maybe something could be worked out to be a limited access. I mean, an understanding with John that, hey, you can only, or sometimes he has a business, might take, like you said, he was in it for a half a day. It's legitimate. You know, that's a part of it, but I like to, as far as keeping it on, I would say we take it off with restrictions. And how those would be, I don't know yet. Maybe we can just work them out.
Yeah, I would just offer one last thought on this. So I was going through files prior to this to see if I needed to bring anything. And there's files that we're back at least 10 years of letters and various things from John Wright to John Flynn to former commissioners and things like, well, by what authority do you have? Can you tell me, you know, this and this to the county commissioners? And so, I mean, I understand what has happened here is the culmination of a very long-standing pattern of whether you call it harassment or just exercising his views on the way he thinks the law should be, whatever. You know, I would expect if you do a hearing, that what you're going to hear at the hearing from multiple county employees is, you know, if you lift this thing, he's going to be in there 4 days a week, and we're not going to get any work done and all that stuff. So I would just say this, what I see, and I'm the newest guy to the whole situation, with the exception of this question. I never even heard of John Wright till, you know, last year when I was running. And is what I would say is we clearly have a very long-standing issue where we have two completely irreconcilable views of the role of government, and the simple question comes down to just how can people get their business done? How can the county employees get their business done? How can other citizens get their business done without being badgered all the time? They're not saying that he's out assaulting people, but he's badgering people all the time. That's what I understand led to the banning order. And if it's lifted today, then, you know, come tomorrow, we're gonna someone's gonna have to deal with a complaint from Mr. Wright. So if you decide to lift it tomorrow, that's fine. I still have the tools available through the criminal case if he's harassing any of the victims or witnesses, where it's like, all right, you know, county commissioners make the decision, lift it, fine. I'll still have tools available to if he's violating the court's order on the criminal case. Those consequences for Mr. Wright are much more serious than this banning order. But at the same time, you know, maybe this is a tool that you want to keep. If it's a tool you want to keep, let's set a timeline when we can go through it in a more methodical way and give him the right to convince you or whoever you appoint, convince them to lift it. I think that's fine. But today you cannot make a decision, I don't think, to make it a permanent order. I think if you wanted to decide to lift it or you want to decide to scale it back and then set a date, I think you could probably do that without that being, you know, great injury to him.
Can I throw a question to John?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not in charge here.
Okay, let's say we did away with this banning order. today or tomorrow or next week, whatever. Can you promise, and would you keep your word, that you come in just for regular official business? I know you like to come to commissioner meetings.
Yes, sir.
Listen, and no problems. And same with when, if you're in the clerk recorder's or Valerie's office, if you have some definite thing to have looked up, something like that, get it done, and no, let's say no harassment. Maybe this is pretty broad, but
Okay, will you define the word meaning harassment? And the respect says, if I go to, say, here at the commission, and Laura or Elaine, Elaine or Laura, introduces, say, parliamentary law, is that a harassment for me to challenge it?
John,
That's
let's
what's
get
called-
off that part of the constitutional aspects
I
and
can't,
parliament.
that's me.
Well, then you're gonna probably be in trouble.
John, you and I have agreed to disagree, correct?
Well,
Okay. Can you agree to disagree at this point with these people here?
if you will assist me, and
Okay,
Corey will assist me,
Okay.
and Mr. Slifka, because there's 3 against 2. I
okay.
say ban it,
Okay,
throw it out,
Okay.
and let's move on from there, and then
Okay.
punish me according to criminal.
And while you're in the courthouse, and you and I have discussed this before, because we're both hard of hearing, we've got to use our inside voices. Okay, that's part of the problem, is people don't understand people like us, because we're hard of hearing.
Uh-huh.
We talk a little bit louder sometimes,
Mhm.
and sometimes when we talk louder, it intimidates others,
Mhm.
okay? Not on purpose, but it does.
But you have a tremendous advantage over me. You wear a badge, and I wear a button.
Okay, but you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
That's where a lot of this comes into play.
yes,
but-
I understand.
But just like you and I have agreed to disagree on some things, you've got to let that fall to the wayside with other people also.
But
just-
you have never done to me, if you quoted me a law that's not a law, I would have challenged you to the end.
You have challenged me on something.
But you never used a law that's not a law. You challenged me because my application to the law that is the law. It's not the same situation all the way around here. And part of my problem is,
And here we
I got
go,
a
here we go
one-track
again,
mind.
John, we agree to disagree. Okay, but that's my point,
Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
yes.
John, could you do that? Could you just forget about this parliamentary law?
I have restrained myself
Oh.
tremendously. I've never used such much as
Oh, no,
a pinky.
I realize, I mean on the parliamentary law and bring up the Constitution all the time. I think everybody here supports the Constitution. But could you just do away with much of that? And this deal, I know this is dear to you on your deal with Nan Terrell and Nellie Sayer. Could we just kind of forget about that? And I know you don't want to, but John,
In the commission meetings,
Okay, here's what I'll do, and I think it's a good suggestion, just what's been taught. Throw the banding order out and put me on test. And also put yourself on a test to do your job properly, and I'll do mine. Is that a fair statement? Sure.
what's your job?
My job is to be a citizen. I support the county. I live in the county. I've been here a long time. And I have no criminal records. And I am perturbed about trying somebody to make me a criminal.
that'd be a separate case, John. That's-
Nevertheless-
That's a whole different issue,
And let's not
John.
get into that.
Right, nevertheless,
We're just-
here we are right now, and it's not together, but it's together. And I put it together, rightly, because your banding order is in the case. I wanted you to be scrutinized, and I wanted to have this meeting like we got right now, where we have our officials here, and right now, Brenda, would you agree to throw out the banding order and put me on the test? And you
John?
be the judge.
John, it is not my decision.
I just give you the authority.
You cannot give me the authority, first off.
Well, I'll give it to Corey then.
Well, it's.
John,
It's not our
you're getting off on
decision.
that thing
It's
that's
this
been getting you in
board's
trouble.
decision.
Okay?
Okay,
Well, is it not a good suggestion to throw out the banding order and to start from scratch? It's been a long time since it all started.
yeah, I have no problem with that.
Corey, do you?
It's not my decision, it's the commissioner's decision. So,
No, I'm asking your opinion.
Here's what I will say, I'll say to the commissioner. It is not harassment for him to come to a hearing and disagree. No, when I was working at the legislature, there was a man who was mentally ill, who was not harmed anybody. He came to almost every hearing, I mean, he went to committee after committee, and he would write out a written statement on whatever bill, and after about the first 30 seconds, it had nothing to do with the bill, and he would start rambling. And the chairman would say, you need to get back on the bill. But he had a right to come speak to the legislature, and he came. He didn't have any more time than anybody else. I think it was 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was that everybody had, usually depending on how packed the day was. And he had a chance to come there, say a bunch of stuff that they all either didn't agree with or didn't know what he was talking about. And that was his right under our Constitution as a citizen to do that. He had a right to stand up and tell them they were completely wrong and all that stuff. So I want to make it clear that Mr. Wright has the right to come to a hearing and voice his opinion and tell you you're wrong, and tell you wrong court system, to tell you English parliamentary law, to tell you whatever. He doesn't have the right to intimidate other citizens or to grind the work to a halt. He has, if you limit people to 2 minutes, he has 2 minutes. If you, I don't think you can't gavel people down simply because they say things you disagree with. That's his right as a citizen. However, if he's way off topic, we're going to talk about sewer problems, and he's going to launch into what happened to John Wilkes Booth, then you can say, you need to stay on the subject. If you have nothing to say on the subject, then please sit down and let someone else speak. So that's that difficult fine line. Citizens have the right to come here to complain, to disagree with you, and that's the way it works. We as citizens, we as government work for the citizens. He has the right to come here and say things that we're convinced are completely wrong. Doesn't have the right then, though, to make that go to the point where it grinds your work to the halt, it harasses or in some way is difficult or problematic for county employees or for other citizens who also want to come here and be heard. I'm not as concerned even about the meetings as I am about, frankly, Doug Ellis's office. He'll be in Doug's office on a regular basis, and they won't get work done. And that's going to be a problem for Mr. Wright, because Doug is a victim in this criminal case. And so I'm just telling you that if you lift it, and frankly, I don't have a problem with you lifting it, but I would expect within a week, I'm going to be calling Ms. Bush and saying, hey, I'm going to have to file something here in court that he's in harassing Doug Ellis, who is a victim in the case, the criminal case. So this is not something that's cut and dried and simple and going to be resolved today. But in the context of what discussion just happened, he has the right to come in here and tell you you're not basing it on the law, the English system, Court of Appeals in DC, whatever he wants to say. So long as in the process he's not, he's not allowed to grind things to a halt, he's not infringing on the rights of other citizens. Give him as much time to speak as you would give to other citizens. Don't shut him down just because you disagree with him, but also don't let him hijack the proceedings. So I guess that's my last response, just because of the discussion that we just had.
Can you live with that, John? What Corey said?
Now state again what you.
Well, but I don't know that the issue is can he
relate it to what's just been said in a package, because what you said to me, and my brain don't register. It doesn't record to what the problem is versus what's been said. Now, I appreciate what you said, and it's probably a good succession, but I have a little difficulty in receiving messages, not because of insanity, it's because it's the way I receive it. I don't hear everything exactly like you hear, but I do hear it, and I would like to have it cleared up a little bit. And what you said undoubtedly has a good meaning, because you're a good man. And you are isolated from this because you never signed for it. So that's another problem that's there. It's 2 against 1. Now, with what you said, I can adjust myself to most everything that's possible, and I've proved it. Simply is, if I was, like some of the people say, I'm a bad character, I'm dangerous, I threaten and I intimidate, I use civil disobedience and citizen's arrest. That's not that's not all the things that are talked about, okay? And that was brought about because, just like Corey says, the subjects were brought up that this brain won't deal with.
Well, we're getting off track there, John. I mean,
Okay, can we just go back to the basics? Dismiss this banning order, just like it was, and I will stand my ground, and that the individuals that brought it forward, these two, and let's start over again. Can we do that?
I'm okay with it. But you
Another
do.
comment.
Madam Chair, thank you. Just a couple of things. The order and the letter that we put together about a year ago was from a decision from the county attorney's office. It was a memo that we received. The purpose was never to address a disagreement. We have many people, John, you're one of many, that will come in and voice their opinions, their disagreement, and that is absolutely fine. That's democracy, and that's what we're here for, is to listen to that. But two is, this has never been an issue that you speak loudly. You speak loudly, many people do, that's not an issue. That has nothing to do with it.
Thank you.
This is because of the effect you have in our offices and having meetings, of interrupting, of shouting, of trying to yell over being gavelled because you were off topic, and grinding this county to a halt. That is the purpose of the letter. You've had tests. You've been invited by commissioners, you've been invited by their elected officials, and just a few months ago, you served Wynn with some paperwork, who was here for another subject. So, John, I'm more than happy to entertain and even plan a hearing for this, but as of today, I will absolutely neither make a motion or second lifting this order until there is a process set up and followed, because that's what we do here. We follow process, and it's gonna have to follow that with you as well. That's all I have to say.
There's four basic people involved in this. All right.
As you
I'll go along with this, but I want it done as due process of the law, constitutional in our constitutional county. Nothing to do with state statutory or outside laws,
There's no security.
just constitutional in our constitutional
I think
county.
what he's saying is he would like to go ahead with a hearing.
No.
Oh, with the hearing? Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure what, okay.
If we could set that,
Let's do that. I think that's something we all agree on.
Gotta be fun!
You know it, you know it.
Well, if we can keep this as a big family, we'll be doing great.
Right.
I guess I would turn it to Corey and see what he said about this.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So let me ask you this, and if we do a hearing, the first question is does John want to request someone other than the commissioners to make the decision, to actually be the hearing officer, let's say? And if you do, then how are we gonna do this? So I need to talk with you, Sadie, in terms of, how do I communicate where we're not, this is very complicated by the fact of the criminal case. I do not want to embroil that in this.
I would say, even though I'm not obviously representing Mr. Wright as to this particular thing, if you want to go through me to help get it set up, I think that would be appropriate given the pending criminal charges.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to.
All right, I'll do a little research on how such a thing would work. I'll discuss it with Ms. Bush, and then I'll make a recommendation to you on how we would do that. And then, so what it would be is basically probably a hearing officer of some kind that would do the actual hearing. Now, ordinarily, the way hearing officers work is they make a recommendation to the decision-making authority, which would be you. If there's a question about that, then both sides could agree to basically a binding arbitration. But again, I need to check and make sure the authority, that the county can actually hand over its authority to an arbitrator. I think probably could, but I want to confirm that. And the second thing is I'm going to be going to a 3-week Army course in January. I'll be gone January 4th to the 22nd. So we would have to do it after that. So,
Can I make one
that's all
more
I got for you at the
statement?
moment.
Yes.
Corey, we elected you officials to be our representatives, and I think you should stay in it, at least on an inside-outside basis, because most of my complications are with you two officials. And that goes all the way to the primary subject matter, which is very complicated and been going on for a long time. And I would like to see all of it resolved, not just one piece of it. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Does that mean you don't want a separate person to hear it? You want the commission to make?
Let me restate. You need somebody in there to advise them.
And that's what they're talking about.
Okay, and I didn't understand that.
Okay.
And how do you feel about that, Sheriff?
We'd look to my legal advisor here.
Okay, me too. I got 2 of them.
Okay, I'll do a little work on this, and I'll communicate with you, and then I'll communication to you as well.
And I thank you all, one and all. Especially my helper.
She's pretty good, John. They keep her around.
She pulled all the strings. You should learn something from her.
Merry Christmas.
Same to you. And y'all will have a good, healthy, and safe season.
And you too.
And I'll need all the help I can get, because I'm in the snow up to my butt.
Right. Thank you very, very much.
This is gonna be fun. I like to try new things.
At least he speaks loud enough we can hear him.
Yeah.
So I'm a little hard of hearing myself, that's why. That's all I had on the agenda, although I think, did you guys wanna talk at 1 o'clock?
That's what's on.
We need to, and I think if you can be here, that would be great. We need to make some managerial decisions. All right. Before that, can I just bring up a resolution discussion? We have an email about the state per diem rates, and that's here. We need to get the resolution advertised today to address that in 2 weeks, which is the first meeting of the year. We did talk about changing our meeting days to Tuesdays instead of Mondays to better accommodate our justice of the peace.
Now, did you check with Val to make sure that she doesn't have anything?
I
Okay.
checked with Val and Kirk and sent an email to the 3 of us and Corey.
Mhm.
Corey's not quite as involved with the Mondays as Kirk is. Val had some dates where weeks are blocked off for trials, because there's so many more. And those are in our calendar, and we'll just address those as they come. Either cancel for that week or have a working meeting or something. So that was the only thing I wanted to make sure that we're still good with.
I'm fine with that. Franklin?
And you did mention you were good with it a couple weeks ago.
Well, and I think it makes sense because Monday after a quote wild weekend, they're coming through with guys in orange suits, and
They're coming through here all the time though, you know.
but
And the
Monday
thing
is
of it
more.
we should be meeting down in the commissioner's room.
That ship sailed, Franklin. Let's stay on task.
Stay on task, yeah.
So
You think
are we-
John right?
Thank you.
We good with that then?
Yes.
Okay, I will make those changes and get them advertised. And then this one will happen at 1, and that's the hours for the public health department. Currently, it's only open Monday through Thursday, and this is something we need to address, because you and I both have gotten complaints about people trying to get immunization shots.
Mhm.
I'd like to be able to be open on Fridays. And so that's also, it's advertised it needs to be, or we stick with closing on Fridays. And then this one follows the state per diem. We do these every single year, this is not new to any of us, but do we wanna stick with that, following the state per diem rates?
I think it makes sense.
All right, cool, thanks, that's all I needed. I will get this off and then send you emails so that you guys see them.
Okay,
All right,
and I guess we're recessed until 1. Is that right?
yes. Thank you.
Could be a quick trip for lunch.
What time is it, Brad?
It's after 12:30.
Is it? Okay, guess we'll get a quick snack.
I think that's what,
12:34 to be exact.
All right.
Really admire you guys being that patient.
Thanks, Mike.
It's difficult.
thanks, Mike.
Well, after I get my lunch, I'll be back.